Welcome to this edition of Rattling Bars. I'm your host, Samantha. We're doing a follow-up on the story that we did earlier about a class action suit that was filed in Louisiana dealing with what they call the farmland. And basically it's a suit that's talk about the inhumane conditions that prisoners are subjected to that serving time in Louisiana State Prison. Joining me today is Samantha. Samantha, introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, my name is Samantha Pourciau. I'm so happy to be back here again to update on our farmland litigation. I'm a senior staff attorney with the Promise of Justice Initiative based in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Promise of Justice Initiative is definitely one of the vanguard organizations out front in dealing with all things prison-related, mainly in Louisiana. And so we want to start by unpacking the latest developments in the farmland litigation. So last time we was talking about whether or not y'all will be successful in having the court certify the litigation as a class action. Talk about the current developments and what that means.
So since we last spoke in early summer 2025, the court has ruled and certified this case as a class action. The court found that there was a general class of all people at Angola who either are currently on the farm line or could be assigned to the farm line, which is nearly everyone at Angola. So that's over 4,000 people who are incarcerated there. And then there's what's called a subclass, which is kind of a group within the general class related to the Americans with Disabilities Act and our claim around that the prison isn't accommodating people who have disabilities around their ability to thermoregulate or basically get their body temperature to a safe place based on either medical conditions they have or certain medications that they take that make it hard for their body to do that. And so we have a subclass of people with disabilities related to that, which is also in the thousands at Angola, as the state has acknowledged that it's at least 18,000 people that they've identified as heat sensitive, and we are arguing that it should be even more than that.
Let's talk about what the farmland is for the benefit of our audience that may not have seen the previous interview we had with you. Talk about what the farmland is.
The farm line is really a tool of punitive social control at Angola, which is a prison that sits on a former plantation named Angola and was named that way because the plantation owner thought the best slaves came from that country. And the farm line is basically the continuation of that history to modern day. It's men being forced to labor on that land with their hands, picking, harvesting crops for the benefit of other people within the prison to feed, but all under the watchful eye of armed guards and under the threat of violence. They will be sent to solitary if they refuse or if they don't work efficiently enough. And so we are arguing in this case that the farm line as it's operated at Angola today is cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th Amendment.
And speaking on that, once you sentenced to Angola, you're going to wind up on the farm line. Is that the case?
Yeah, so it is for the majority of people who arrive at Angola, it is the first work assignment that they are given. And we are putting on in our case this idea that it is meant to break you. It is meant to make men understand when they enter the prison that they do not have any autonomy over their physical body, that they are now belonging to the state. And so we'll have class members, we'll have named plaintiffs who have recently been on the farm line explain what it was like for them as they first got to Angola, to have that as basically the orientation. And one of our named plaintiffs, Joseph Guillory, explains eloquently how he felt like they were trying to break horses and that it felt very similar to that when he arrived many years ago. And we'll have people who arrived more recently who will similarly echo the same sentiment.
You said earlier that you're going to go to the farm line or they're going to put you in solitary confinement.
Yeah, so if you refuse to work, you get a disciplinary write-up. It's known in Angola as like a Rule 27 or Rule 28 is a work offense. And one of the sanctions for that could be sent to disciplinary segregation. And so oftentimes people will make the conscious decision to say, I don't want to go be a slave for the state. I'm going to go to lockup. I can't do this. But other people other people need to continue being in contact with their lawyers, with their loved ones. And they say, I'm just going to suck it up and go out there because I can't take the alternative. And so it's really not, it's not a choice. It's not voluntary. It is a coerced work assignment.
Okay, so we know that we're at a juncture right now that we can ready to go to court and have this adjudicated. In your knowledge, do you know of any suits that have been filed contesting, or was this the first time that this ever happened?
To our understanding, this is the first litigation attacking the farm line as a whole, and it's a really novel claim, but we think we have the evidence to put it on, and it's time for this practice to end once and for all.
Okay, so let's take a deep dive into the litigation and when y'all filed it and what is the expectation? How you going forward? What are some of the things that y'all gonna be looking at in terms of strategy wise?
Sure. So we filed the litigation in September 2023, and over the past 2 years, we've been working to get to this point, which is a trial that's coming up starting on February 3rd in Baton Rouge in the federal district courthouse there. We have been litigating in between that time to make it officially a class action, which we have now succeeded. And we also have been litigating over the past 2 summers emergency protections for the men who are forced to work there to ensure that during the summer they have at least some protections that ensure their physical safety. And now that we're going to trial, we're going to try to make some of those permanent instead of just temporary. But we also broadly want to end the farm line once and for all. And so that claim is related to it being cruel and unusual punishment. We intend to prove that it really attacks the dignity of man, the fundamental dignity of man. And we have evolved as a society. We evolved past slavery, we evolved past convict leasing, and we've evolved past this new form of this farm line. And so we'll have expert witnesses. We have a doctor from Harvard, a doctor from Colorado. And when I say doctor in that capacity, I mean an academic doctor, like a PhD doctor. So we have a sociologist, we have someone who's a historian of science and medicine and history of African American studies, who are all going to speak to that, to the psychological harm, to the dignitary harm attendant to the farm line, how what is happening at Angola is really not happening anywhere else. There is a lot of farming labor happening in prisons across our country. And one of our experts, Dr. Josh Sabika, he has he created an entire lab, he calls the Prison Agriculture Lab, to study that issue, where he has surveyed nationwide what is happening in our prisons in terms of producing food. And he has now studied the farmland at Angola and will testify in court at trial that this is unlike anything else he's seen. It really is clearly designed just as punishment, and it's not about producing food in the way that other farms around the country are. And so we'll have that evidence. And then obviously, most importantly, we'll have the people who are impacted directly testify about their experiences. We plan to have a couple of named plaintiffs who have been fighting this fight since before 2023. They have not been on the farmland since then because the prison took them off of the farmland when we filed the lawsuit to try to moot out the case. But then we will also have class members who have been on the farmland this past summer, last summer, to be able to testify to current conditions about what's going on right now out there and why it's still cruel and unusual.
When you file a litigation, and I want you to walk our audience to how hard it is and how difficult it is to get certified as a class act. So talk about that, how hard it was, and what the court had to find in order to to certify as a class don't mean that we won. It just says that the court recognized that the issues that's being complained about affect a wide variety of people.
Well, even stepping back before getting certified as a class, I also want to acknowledge how hard it is as a person who's in prison to be able to file a lawsuit. The Prison Litigation Reform Act, which is something Congress passed over 30 years ago to curtail prisoner litigation, requires people to go through an administrative grievance procedure that the state can set up and put any guidelines around before they're allowed to enter the court. And so all of the 7 individual named plaintiffs in this lawsuit had to go through that grievance process, which is very difficult. It contains multiple steps in order to be able to file. And so they've been working with us for even more than years now. It's been 3 years at this point. And so they did that to sue on their own behalf, but then with the knowledge that we were going to be trying to make this a class action. And that meant that they were not just suing on their behalf, they were asking the court to let them represent every single person at Angola. And in order for the court to come to that decision, we had both an oral argument on the law and an evidentiary hearing that was essentially a mini trial about the case to ensure that it can be considered a class action. And what really it breaks down to is whether or not the policies that affect people are consistent and everyone is treated kind of under the same policies and procedures such that the court can really assess this as a systemic issue. And that is what the court ruled in favor of us, finding that this is a systemic issue. It isn't just these 7 people that are being harmed by this. It is the entire prison is being operated under the same system that needs to be examined as being cruel and unusual punishment.
How did this resonate with the population at Angola? Like I did a lot of time, and the practice in prison is when information come out, we got the best way of disseminating information ever. You know, once something come out that affect everybody, it spreads like wildfire. How did they receive it?
So the order came out on December 23rd, 2025. So it was a Christmas present.
Yeah, come on.
Unfortunately, because of that, it was hard for us to be in touch with our incarcerated plaintiffs immediately because the prison was shut down for the holiday. But we were able to get in touch with them. And a lot of them had seen it on the news before we were able to tell them first, which I mean, I was happy that the news was covering and that they saw them. They saw it, but the news did cover it, and that's how it initially spread within Angola, and people were really excited to hear about it. We also have a plaintiff, an associational plaintiff named VOTE, which stands for Voice of the Experienced, and they have been instrumental in getting the word out because they have currently incarcerated members. They were founded by formerly incarcerated men who came home from Angola, and they are in constant communication with their currently incarcerated members through JPay. And so they were able to use that network that they have to get the word out and to make sure folks knew, okay, now this is a class action. We're going to trial in February, and this affects everyone. There's nothing you have to do to be a part of it. It's automatic, but this will now affect everyone at Angola without any question.
Okay, as we wrap up, talk about the impact this is going to have on that system. Because how important is the farmland to Angola?
The defendant's position is that it saves them millions of dollars in food that they don't have to otherwise purchase to feed the population. And so that is the position that they are taking. We are saying that, okay, the way you operate the farm line doesn't have to be unconstitutional. The way you are operating it right now is, and you can't cite saving money as a reason to harm someone's inherent dignity and treat them the way they are being treated and run this as a punitive program. And so I think it really puts a spotlight on recognizing the humanity of each person within our criminal legal system and making sure the system does uphold the constitutional rights to do so.
Okay, thank you. And tell our audience how they're on top of what's going on with this and stay in touch with you and your organization.
So yeah, we'll be going to trial, like I said, on February 3rd. We'll be reporting updates on our social media, and VOTE will also be updating as the trial is happening. We plan to have a press conference on February 5th that hopefully will get a lot of media coverage. And so I ask folks to just kind of stay aware and check in on the news as the trial is going on. We're not going to get a ruling. It is very incredibly unlikely we would get a ruling at the end of the trial because this will be a trial before a judge, not a jury. And so the judge has already indicated he, in that instance, it is the standard for the judge to ask the parties to brief the issue after the trial is over. And so we'll be doing that. But the judge has, I wouldn't say promised, but has acknowledged that we really need a permanent injunction in this case as soon as possible so that we aren't getting into the next heat season without some kind of protections. And so he has indicated his understanding of that and will endeavor to try to get a ruling out before the next heat season. And so we're hoping for a ruling, as soon as possible once the trial is over. But I would just encourage folks to sign up at the Promise of Justice Initiative's website for our newsletter and to follow us on social media on all the platforms wherever you seek your news.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much. You heard it, Promise of Justice Initiative. They're taking the initiative to ensure that people are treated like humans. We have Angola, Louisiana Prison. That's a former plantation. The light is being shined on it for all the inhumane conditions that they've been subjecting people to, mainly as it relates to work. When you see any footage on Angola, the first thing you see is prison guards on horseback with shotguns, and the people picking whatever crop is in the same color uniform. The only difference between slavery and now is they justify what they're doing under the pretense of the 13th Amendment. We ask that you continue to support the Real News and Rally Bar, because guess what? We're actually the real news.